welcome back to the In Our Headspace podcast. This is episode 12, right before Thanksgiving. So I think after a couple things at the beginning, maybe we'll talk about what we're thankful for in this holiday season.
Of course.
During 2020, in a time where people are discouraged from having Thanksgiving celebrations.
Yes.
So the first thing we're going to get into is the question Jared proposed last time. We did not get a single comment,
A single view.
on our YouTube video.
Maybe someone else listened to it.
Hey, here's the thing. I'll take responsibility on this one.
No, it's fine.
I didn't share I didn't share it on my social media.
We're not in it for the fame.
No. I'm just saying.
All right.
There's a correlation between when I share it on my story versus when I don't. And when I don't, we get 0 views.
Correlation doesn't always mean causation.
No. Okay. You know what? We only have a sample size of 1, so maybe you're right. Maybe our viewer base just abandoned us. Anyways,
your grandpas are only hope for those views.
All right. So, Jared, what was the question?
All right. So the question that was proposed last episode with 0 views,
yes,
was who is more wise, the man who sinned or the man who didn't?
Okay.
And when you ask, is there a right answer? I don't think there's a right answer.
Okay.
Because when I talked to some religious people, they unanimously, separately argued that the man who did not sin is the wise one.
Yes.
Because he knows he shouldn't do X.
Right, but that whole thing gives an interesting perspective because they are the ones less likely to make the exception to that. And I think that's what makes that question pretty deep is innately the term sin means
like wrongdoing. You did something wrong.
Wrongdoing and all that, and it has its own connotation to it. But when you take that and you put it in the perspective of someone who doesn't necessarily follow that belief system, then it becomes who's wiser, the person who did the wrong thing or the person who didn't.
See, for me, when I was thinking about that question, there's plenty of philosophers have talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Greek ones too, because they talk about everything.
And the Greeks know all.
But it was based off the concept of, I forgot who, so many people have said it, but it was the concept of experience. You don't fully experience an emotion that someone projects, like, having your firstborn child. Like, the whole point is you're not going to feel what they feel until you have your firstborn child. You can feel...
You can empathize with it.
You can empathize. You could simulate, be like, oh, I was like super excited for this one. Like this, this, that. But until you truly experience whatever that environment was, whatever happened, it's not going to be the same.
Yeah. You're never, ever in your life going to experience the exact same thing someone else did in the same way from the same perspective.
Yeah, like you can get close to that by experiencing what they experienced.
But still, it's going to be different.
Yeah. But like the point is, you could try to, was it empathize?
Yes.
Okay. You could try to empathize as hard as you want, but, I'm sure empathy's good, whatever. But I think there's a huge difference between when something happens and someone empathizes compared to when someone sympathizes, like, yeah, I went through that or whatever.
Well, okay. So that's backwards.
Oh, okay.
I thought that's what you meant. So sympathize is what you're talking about. Empathize is relating what you did to an experience that I had of similar nature and being able to connect with that.
Okay, so I'm talking about empathy.
Yes. So sympathy is where you feel the best way I've heard.
It's like, oh, I'm sad.
Pity.
Okay, pity. There you go.
It's having pity for somebody's situation, which isn't always a negative connotation because pity tends to have a negative connotation. But like if one person was going through something bad and you were like, oh, I'm so sorry, I hope you feel better, that's sympathy.
All right, yeah.
Empathy would be, oh, I know where you're coming from. I dealt with this myself and I know exactly how you feel and this is how I went through it. That's empathy.
All right. And so philosophers, specific ones, but they would argue you could always try to come close, but if you haven't experienced it, it's going to be completely different. And they talk about it too, as in learning lessons.
Yeah.
So for like our test subject, a generic person with the goal in mind to be better, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They can read about other people's mistakes and be like, oh, okay, don't do what they did.
Right.
But I think it comes off completely different when someone made that mistake and they're like, oh, yeah, do not make that mistake.
Yes, because I made that mistake.
And you felt the full burden of the consequences of whatever the mistake was.
Yes.
And so that's why, in the context I just gave, is why I think the person who sinned is the wiser person.
Yes.
It's because he went through this whole little hero's journey arc.
Yes.
About why not, like, whatever he's told not to do, he did it. He's like, okay, that's why you don't do it, rather than just not doing it.
And this kind of relates to the concept that we have alluded to a couple times, where we say the person who hasn't experienced any hardship is probably less equipped than the person who has faced even just one hardship. Because hardship is a part of human life. Specifically, it takes different forms depending on the era you're in, but there's always been hardship in human life, and it's always a human trait to be able to adapt and overcome those hardships. And I think in a society where our hardships don't necessarily come from a shortage of food or predators or natural disasters in most places or weather or anything like that, our hardships mostly come from society and mentality and mental illness, or even just sickness, like things like that, or financial stability and all that. That's where hardship could come from, which is a lot more of a vague concept to try to deal with, which I think nowadays it's like if you experience something like traumatizing later down in life, yes, you will have that trauma, but as long as it was dealt with in a healthy way eventually and it didn't amount to something bad, you now have that under your belt as like something you can overcome. And you face your and then you're with this other person, say, who has never faced something like that, and then you both experience the next trauma together, you will likely handle it better than the person who has yet to handle that before. Merely based on and this is way oversimplified, but merely based on the fact that you have experienced this type of sadness before and this other person hasn't, and they don't know what to do. And I think all of this to say that, like, if you've made a mistake, you tend to learn more than the person who has never made a mistake. Which I would say is exactly what that question, at least to me, is interpreted by. And the exact same way you put it, Jared, was like, you are wiser due to you gaining an experience in life. Whether it be good or bad, it's an experience in life, and you hopefully have learned it.
Yeah, because from the other side, it's like complete context based. Because, like, for example, like a repeat offender for whatever crime they did, is clearly they're not learning, and clearly they're not becoming more wise from the mistake they keep repeating every time.
Right.
And so if you present it that way, then it's like, well,
yeah, then he's in the wrong.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, he's not so wise, is he?
So I'd say, yeah, exactly. It can have either, I think in this context, the person who has not sinned goes very strong in either direction. Whether it be, if you are the one who sinned, that could make you the wisest, but it can also make you the biggest fool, as far as you keep making the same mistake over and over in that context, where it's never like, well, yeah, they're wise, because it's like, either you're really wise or you're really not. And I think that's what's interesting is there's no real middle ground answer, I'd say. Unless if there is, and you would like to explain it.
Zero views episode.
Yes, go ahead and leave a comment on this one, and we will address it if we get anything. If we don't, we're probably not bringing this back up. But
this is probably the last time we're talking about it, honestly.
But hey, if people want to interact, we're open for interaction. So that was crap! I forgot to start the timer, Jared.
I have no idea how much time has passed.
In the dark. I think it's been like 8 minutes. So let's see.
Next, I assume we talk about Thanksgiving, thankfulness, blah blah blah.
Yes, and I want to put a slight not spin, but I want to broaden that a little bit and be like, I want to talk about what we're thankful for, and then the concept of taking things for granted and losing gratefulness for things.
Okay.
Because we get them so easily. And if you would like, you could start. If you don't know where to start, I can go ahead and start.
All right. I'll start.
Okay.
So, we're another Greek guy.
Oh, snap.
It's like Plato, Socrates, or Aristotle, one of the three. But
one of the big three.
One of the big three, Holy Trinity. But one of them talked about like there's a general concept of being thankful that they talk about, such as they talk about the poor man is the man who like always wants and will never get all that he wants, so he's always going to be poor.
Yes.
But the rich man, he's completely content with what he has.
That aligns with the concept of the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Yep.
For that
we need
same,
communism.
I think, yeah. No, I think more appropriately, I think what you said is probably more accurate, but it's easy to throw that in people's face and be like, as a motivational thing. But
whenever I hear that phrase, I associate with that anti-capitalism. Anyways,
it's funny. I kind of associate it with the opposite. I think I'd associate it with someone being like, you're not gonna do anything unless you make a change, essentially.
I always view it from the rich need to pay more taxes, the rich get richer, and the poor get poorer. But anyways, and so one way they talk about it in becoming more thankful was stripping away all the stuff that they're comfortable with and then realizing, geez, I wish I had that now. Now, for example, if I didn't drive a car and I had to drive or go place to place by bike or public transit, I promise you I'll be very annoyed. And I would just be thinking, fuck.
I wish I had my car.
Or another one, a smartphone, specifically a smartphone. We could even be more general than just say phone. But if I just had a normal flip phone, it's like, the utility of this thing just went down by a lot.
Right.
But so anyways, their whole thing was, take away all this stuff you have or whatever. And then you will come to the realization, it's like, I actually do have a lot.
Yes.
Because it seems like no matter what position you're in, like we could take a guy in the middle. There could be a guy above him and a guy below him, and they could all be thinking, I wish I had this. And they're all making the same silly mistake when they could just be happy for what they currently have right now.
Right. And even go beyond that.
And so for me now, what I'm thankful for is simply being alive, as crazy as that sounds. Because again, more from Greek people, they talk about, a few of them, like one of the three again, how much of a privilege it is to wake up and move just in that sense alone. Because then, like, I think of extremes, for example, like a paraplegic. If I was in a wheelchair, my first instinct, if I were to be in a wheelchair right now, Jesus, this sucks.
Yeah.
Not being able to, well, just like how inconvenient now for me to move around is turned into.
Yes.
Because now I need a wheelchair to go everywhere. I can't use my legs. I couldn't walk up the stairs. Like, there's just so many things that would be an inconvenience now.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's a headache. And then you got to accommodate for all, like, it's just like, okay, that's a lot to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't had, like, the most debilitating thing I had for a while was pulled muscle in my back. And it was really painful for like 2 weeks. It was probably the most pain I've ever been, honestly.
Yeah.
But I just had, this goes back to kind of the sympathy thing. Because again, I don't have anything debilitating, but I could kind of emulate it in my head and then think, oh, that's bad.
Right.
And so that's why when I was talking to him, he's like, I need to start working out again, put this body to work. Because at least it can work, type of deal.
Yeah,
but there's also benefits of working out, but simply not take it for granted and be like, oh, it's whatever.
Oh yeah, and I think for me, it's hard for me to say I'm thankful for this one thing, because I definitely could pick a specific thing in my life and go on about how I'm grateful about it, and I'm gonna go more with a more overarching statement like you were, where I think being able to recognize that everything that comes your way in life is finite and you won't have unlimited access to everything all the time, such as you won't have the unlimited ability to move around super nimbly and athletically, because as you age, that ability goes away. So take advantage of it while you still can. You won't always have the money you have now, because there's always a risk of that money going away due to some tragedy or some problem arising. You won't always have all of these things. So I think it's best to treat things as if, like, make the best of the things that you can. And I think, like, it's, say your opinion on it, on your situation right now, because your analogy was, if you were to become unable to walk, that would be an extreme inconvenience and it would cause all these problems. But say you were born that way, your outlook on it would be completely different. It would probably be the exact same outlook you have now, because that's just the way life is. But like I said before, when you're shown the thing you could have, or you have the thing that you have now and then that gets taken away, your perspective on it becomes so negative and so like, I didn't deserve this, or I got this taken away from me, or this opportunity was never given to me. And you could always be the glass half empty, and you could always be looking at things like, why is this happening to me? How come I wasn't able to do this? And I think,
be a little pessimistic.
Yes, which there are people that are like that, but all it takes is a perspective shift to, oh, I'm glad this happened. Instead of saying, oh, I'm upset that this didn't happen, stop saying that and just start saying, well, I'm glad this thing did happen. Like you were saying, I'm glad I was able to wake up today with no problems. I'm glad I was able to start my car. I'm glad I was able to drive to my job I still have. I'm glad of all these things because they're not just outright given to you. Everybody has to work for what they have. For the most part, somebody has to work for what you have, whether it be yourself or your parents or whoever in your life. And I think that's why there's this like big stereotype between like the humble small town boy versus the big city rich kid. Is like, the main difference between those two people is one person's never taught the value of gratefulness. One person takes all of the things for granted because that's just the way life is. And I guess that brings up the discussion of this buzzword that gets thrown around all the time nowadays online, which is privilege. And I will share my thoughts, and Jared, I want to hear your thoughts because I don't know fully your thoughts, but I have kind of your perspective on it. But my thoughts are, it's one thing to recognize that your life started out better than other people and you got certain advantages compared to other people based on the context of in which you lived your life. But I also don't think it's fair as someone without those advantages to somehow hold something they have no control over against them. Yes, people do. A rich kid will react to a situation different than a poor kid because of the things that they have access to. Mm-hmm. But because this person has lived their life the whole time this way, doesn't mean you need to now tear that person down to your level to make yourself feel like your life is worth it. And I really mean, like, people do it in an attempt to almost drag the other person down and push themselves up so they can try to be on equal level, when in reality, you're just tearing other people down. Yes, it's frustrating to see people with way more opportunity and way more everything than you complain about something small. But if that's a problem in their life, it's a problem in their life. Like I said before, everyone has problems. But I don't think being like, oh, well, that's your privilege. You're privileged because of this reason. How dare you be privileged? There are privileged people who are humble and recognize the fact that they are better off than other people, and they put the resources into helping other people. And I think that's how it should be. And yes, there are people with quote-unquote privilege that abuse that and do whatever they want and then laugh in the face of people who don't have those same advantages. But I also don't think it's fair to, like, someone to tell me without knowing any of my life or anything I've been through or anything I've worked for and tell me, well, you're just privileged. Because yes, in some ways I am. In other ways, I'm not. I'm not saying anybody has ever done this, but I'm just making a case for, I don't like that it always has to be something wrong. And that goes back to that pessimistic outlook. Always telling someone that, or like always having the view on everything around you as, well, I don't have this, or I don't have that, or this person has more than me. And all of that is just such a, like, lame way to live. And people in the worst living conditions, people who, you could be in poverty, you could be homeless, and you can be poor in America. But even that isn't the same as, like, living in an entire country that's impoverished with extremely tyrannical government and no resources to go around for everybody. Like, those are two different scenarios. And I feel like if you want to talk that way to other people above you, then the people below you should be able to talk to you the same way. But the fact of the matter is, people don't like being talked down to. It's not an effective way to communicate to people. It doesn't get anything done except offend people. And there are people who just want to offend other people. But that comes from a place of, like, ungratefulness. Because even you talking about how this other person is privileged is you not being grateful for the life that you have. And I think that's the irony of it, is these people are like, well, you were better off than me or these other people. And you're talking this way, which comes off or rubs me the wrong way because this rich person is doing this thing they can do. And it's like, be grateful for what you have. And if you need to work harder than other people, and I'm not talking about anything other than, like, wealth. I don't want to get into the whole political, like, white privilege versus whatever. This isn't the type of privilege I'm talking about because I don't feel like I'm educated enough on that topic to even speak about it, especially on the podcast.
It's like, there's a lot to talk about.
Yes.
I want to lightly talk about the race privilege real quick.
Okay.
I feel like for us, it's I think it's a poor argument from a lot of things I hear, about white
Mhm.
privilege specifically.
Okay.
Perspective wise, for example, I am a brown man.
Okay. Yes, you are.
Basically, all my friends are white.
Yes, that is true.
I grew up with a lot of white people.
Yes.
Very, very, like, I had like a few Mexican friends
Mm-hmm.
way back when, but other than that, it's always been white people.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I'm standing in a group of people in Idaho,
Mm-hmm.
I see other white people, and I'll be like, I don't ever think about my race whenever I see it. I just
Yes.
see other white people.
Yeah.
And because of my surrounding, whenever I think of a woman or man,
Mm-hmm.
I think of a white person.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And so what I find ironic about this whole white privilege thing is it not inevitable that the majority would be privileged? Would it be any different if we were in Africa where there were more black people than there were white people? Because then it'd be immediately flipped and the majority would be black.
Yeah.
And so now they would be the privileged ones. And then we could go to brown people. And it's just like, that's
Right.
why I feel like it's kind of like no shit. Like, it's majority this race.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you expect, honestly?
I think the problem arises when, like I was saying, people are made to feel bad because of circumstances they can't control, which is extremely ironic coming from people who are accusing other people of putting other people down for factors they can't control. It's the exact same thing. So it's like, I'm mostly white, I guess. I'm like dark white. If I'm, say, being accused of putting another person down because of their race or because of their privilege, I should say in this context, and then another person comes at me doing the exact same thing, the only reason they are seen in a better light than I am is because they're doing it to me, who I'm doing it to somebody. Oh, I haven't even done it to somebody else, right? But because of all the factors that play into the way people think I am now getting treated the way that they perceive me treating other people when I'm not, which is just backwards. And I think that just comes down to, don't treat other people like that. Like, don't try to force other people down. And yes, there is context, and there are definitely messed up people out there, and there are people who do operate that way in their mind. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's not everybody, and it's not fair to everybody to be put down that way. And I'm not saying everybody puts them down, but there are the internet specifically is a showcase for, like, even other people of privilege acting like they're fighting for the duty of the other people. And it's like frustrating to see, like, so much, I guess, anger, because that's like people's first initial response is to just accuse other people or yell at other people, no matter the context. And that comes with what we were saying on another episode, where there's no consequences or anything like that. But I think it's just frustrating because, yes, I get annoyed when I see, for example, a rich white person complaining about something minuscule, right? Like, my Starbucks was the wrong coffee or whatever, and they're all screaming at the employee who's just trying to make a living. I don't agree with that, because that person is doing an extremely negative thing. But at the same time, I don't go, man, because you're white.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's because you don't have any problems in your life other than this Starbucks thing, and you haven't learned how to deal with problems, which is a byproduct of being privileged, if you will, but it's also a byproduct of just the way our society operates. Like, there are very little consequences, very little problems that really go around that more than the middle class have to deal with. Middle class and lower, like the higher class people, and this is a blanket statement, but for the most part, I'd say if you are raised in an environment where you don't really have any issues as far as opportunity goes, your perception of the entire world is going to be completely different than a person who has had to fight their way up. Whether or not that's good or bad, I just think it's important that we teach, as a society, we teach the lesson of gratefulness, which is sorely needed, I feel, for people of all shapes, sizes, colors, ages, everything, especially in our society right now where I don't know, there's no gratefulness, I feel, for anything that we have. Just the fact that we're in America instead of some other worse option, it just, I don't know. It bothers me when people are like, oh, I hate America. You can hate America. You can not like the decisions our government is making. I totally see that. But at least, like, again, at least you're waking up. At least you're
We'll just
making your own decisions.
We'll ship them off to a village in South America.
I know.
They'll get raided the next morning.
Yeah, like see how big of a difference. Like, it's all perspective, and people in America like to complain about how bad they have it while they're typing on their iPhone on Twitter. All these privileged people sent by iPhone on Twitter on iPhone, and it's like, at that point, your argument of privilege is nullified, I feel. Because I really don't think that's a strong enough argument on its own to really accuse people of anything. Because as everything shows, rich people can be amazing people. Poor people can be horrible people. It literally doesn't matter. It just matters what kind of person you are and the things you've experienced in life and the way that we are taught things as a society. And I feel like people are very rarely grateful unless they're forced to be grateful.
I need a fucking notepad. I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
Because as you say things, I generate new thoughts.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I still need to talk about all this other shit.
You have so many other things
and
to
so
say.
I'm sitting here, and I still remember it somehow, what I want to talk about.
Then go for it, Jared.
We'll go back to what you said. I get off
my soapbox.
So going back to what you said real quick before I talk about other things, because I still want to talk about privilege.
Yes.
I haven't given my spiel about it. I just wanted to lightly touch base on the whole ethics privilege, or not race privilege.
Yes.
So when you were going back to the whole money situation, where you have like the rich person from Starbucks bitching.
Yes.
I view that whole scenario simply as, money does make life easier.
Yep.
When you have all this money, like, it's not going to necessarily bring you happiness, but it will make your life easier because it's like, oh, I don't worry after about this financial problem,
Yes.
all these liabilities.
Since our country runs off money, you can solve a good amount of problems by just paying them off.
Yes, definitely. And so I'm going to say it's understandable because I even have one of our friends told me one of their mothers, their mom, acted very poorly to a Walmart employee.
Oh, okay.
Because it was due to like regulation on the store themselves. They're like, yes, we have the product, but I have to wait until like 2 hours from now to give it to you.
Yes.
And this person's parent did not take that very lightly.
They didn't like that they couldn't get their thing right now.
And they're not even necessarily rich compared to others.
But it's an expectation.
Yeah. And so it's almost like this behavior should be expected because you're simply taking, oh, I used to worry about this, and now you take out that what you used to worry about. What are you gonna replace that with now? And so it seems like the trivial matters is what replaces.
Oh yeah, humans always want something to worry about. We're problem solving in the brain, so there's always something to have a problem with.
Yeah, and I'm sure at some point we'll get to a point where the next evolution above this will be something completely different where like we'll have all the ins and outs labbed out, or however you want to put it, where people aren't like maybe we'll get to a point where you 100% get your coffee right. And so it's like, now that you don't worry about that, what else are you going to worry about now? And I'm sure it's always going to change that way. And so going back again, back to poor people, rich people, back to your analysis of the rich city boy and the farm boy,
small town.
One thing that I thought interesting is when you said something like that, it was the Philippines. Philippines is classified as a third world country, and yet when you that's a place where people like to go vacation because it's super nice, super cheap, blah blah blah. But what's interesting in the Philippines is that there are people like us that have, I don't own a home, but there are people in the Philippines that own very big homes.
Yes. That
are like right next to the ocean.
There's a resemblance of our society.
Yes. But you could see a direct cutoff too, where it's like, oh, this is why it's a third world country. Within its own borders, you can see why it's a third world country. But at the same time, you can see people that are doing extremely well there and have plenty of money and have
from
homes.
All the tourism.
Yeah. And so I just find it very interesting because you could see both extremes in one place in the Philippines, where you can see
fascinating
the people.
It's almost like a line drawn within this like Philippines.
Within the Philippines. Okay, now going to privilege, not based on race. One, I hate that word now.
Privilege?
I hate that word. It's a trigger word for me now.
Yeah, me too, actually. Like, I get it. I know what it means, but I hate when people use it because, like I was saying before, they use it within a context of just like, what's your privilege?
It's just whenever I hear the word privilege, I think of that. And so it's just ruined the word for me. But going back to it, like the reason why I have issues with it is pointing out privilege I have issues with.
Okay.
Is because they've completely, and it's the people who, this is like kind of leaning.
The vocal minority, if we're being honest.
Yeah, this is leaning back to race privilege.
It's people trying to give themselves a better image than they have. And so they're compensating by trying to call other people out, making themselves look better.
See, my issue is it's been completely weaponized is why I don't like the topic being brought up. Because it's like, what's a good example? It's like looking at someone. It's like, you got a lot of freckles on your face. It's like, yeah, what the fuck are you implying? Type of deal.
Well, that's what I was saying. It's completely based on factors that the person themselves doesn't control.
Yeah, or it's like, you got some mighty crooked teeth there, and it's just like,
thanks.
Well, yeah, it's just like, where are you trying to get with by saying this statement?
Hey, wait a second, Jared.
Yeah?
You're not me?
I'm not white.
You're not... No, like, you're not me?
Oh, yeah.
You're someone else?
I know.
Hey, I'm going to watch it.
Okay, so I don't like it because it's been weaponized. You get same now. It's just like pointing out someone has freckles, but it's like, oh, they were self-conscious of it, and this, and I bring it up.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, people aren't even self-conscious, really, about, like, their privilege. It's just, like, they're just pointing it out. But anyways, yeah, so I have a negative bias towards the word privilege, but now what do I think of privilege, ignoring race? It's just going, like... I could make an argument that really no one ever should be complaining about privilege, because if we take it, so if we have the guy that lives the worst possible life, like some dude who survived Auschwitz, who lost both his legs and his arms and has one eye, like, would it make sense if he was going around, like, if he was the one talking about privilege, he's at the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
Because he's experienced so much
He
fucked
would
up
have
stuff.
every right, essentially.
Yes, but it would still turn into something where he could be an asshole about it.
Yes.
And just be like, look at me. You're all more privileged than me in every stretch of the imagination. Blah, like,
yeah.
See, the issue is what I'm talking about is, God, this is going to get so off tangent. So I won't.
We got 20 minutes. You're good.
So what I was going to identify, like, when I look at that and I see a guy that has experienced a lot of bad things, but then uses that to weaponize it and be like, you're all more privileged than me, you're all blah, 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 and go on about it. I view that as something inherently wrong.
Yes.
And the issue is, like, I would need to sit here and think more about it to explain why. But this is going back to humans. It's easier to see patterns than it is to explain why that pattern is happening.
Yeah.
Basically what I'm saying, I see a pattern and I can't fully explain the pattern. That was a little tangent. I didn't want to get too much. But so it just turns into, I don't know if power hierarchy is the right word, but we're just taking a guy who's experienced the worst, and then he sits here and talks about how everyone's more privileged than he is,
and he's given this power.
Yes, but if we take it in that context, because everyone's pointing out privilege, right?
Yes.
Well, if we just look at the person who's doing the worst, then how could any of us make an argument for privilege? It wouldn't matter if you were 2 tiers above me or below me. If we just took the worst guy who then talked about privilege, just how could any of us talk, like the people accusing other people of privilege?
Yeah.
They would have it better than the guy who lost all. Like, it's just like, I find it a flawed thing to talk about.
Yeah, I don't think it's valid, really. As far, the one context I can see it valid, and I would consider this bias more than privilege, because privilege means things are given to you without you needing to work for it, where bias is like, I make a decision in favor of you
or against,
because of a specific characteristic that I prefer. So, like, where that could become a problem is within our justice system. For example, no examples really to say. I'm just saying, like, a judge prefers one thing about one person, and they have the exact same situation, court case, or whatever happens with a person who he doesn't necessarily prefer. Maybe he doesn't dislike, but he doesn't have the thing that the other person had. That will subconsciously influence his decision, right?
And that's basically inevitable, because the whole
and that's kind of my point
of the judge is to interpret.
Yes.
We don't have set in stone type of deal
like
by the book.
Yeah.
In terms of law, like, it's an interpretation of the law.
Yes. So I just find it interesting that, like, it can, in the right circumstance, cause very big issues, but within the context that it mostly happens, people throwing that word privilege around does more harm than good. Actually, it does almost all harm.
Well, it's because, like, what are you wanting to talk about when you bring that up? It's like me going to a guy that's 4'5", be like, man, you are short. And it's like,
look at you, you're short.
Yeah. I was like, what are you trying to get at here?
Yeah.
All you've done is make that guy
look.
Yeah.
I can touch the top of the door.
It's like, oh, you can't go on this ride.
Yeah. Hey, privilege.
Yeah. And
Watch
so,
your privilege, Jared.
It's just like, It's like, what?
No, I think maybe we'll get off this topic because we've been talking about it a long time. But all of that to say, I think people behaving that way and using that word in the context that they use it is caused by a lack of being grateful for the things that they have. And if someone gets, say Jared gets a PS5, right? And
Lucky
I don't.
me.
And I don't get a PS5. Then if I were a person that acted like that, I'd be like, wow, Jared, how dare you get something I'm not allowed to get because of my financial income versus your financial income, which means you should feel guilty and you should feel bad about making a decision in your life that affects me in no way because I don't like it.
This is just it feels like a smite argument. I'm just like, you goddamn bastard.
Like people I feel like so many people worry about everything else but themselves to a fault. And it sucks to see people behave in a certain way, especially online, when you're like, you're just going to act this way and nothing's going to happen. You're never going to learn because you shut yourself off from everything that's telling you otherwise. And you only listen to things you want to hear. And since it's the internet, you can just mute whatever else. And you get sucked into this vacuum chamber of like, I'm always right. I'm always right. I'm never wrong. Oh, you're arguing with me? Well, joke's on you. You're talking to the guy who's never wrong. And then they just go rampaging online.
They've
and
got
then
how to name it be my name.
Yeah, exactly, dude. The hubris of these people. But back on the topic of being thankful, I think that goes in line with taking things for granted. And
Jesus Christ.
I've had this thing in the back of my throat and I could not get rid of it.
It's your EPA water. If you're using stainless steel,
It's probably,
like you could have been.
It's probably the chocolate I ate before I got off work.
Oh.
Oh, actually, you know what it is? It's the cottage cheese I ate right before this. It's a lot of dairy. And just getting all phlegmy.
All right.
So I think, I don't know the solution, what the solution to that could even be as far as like people need more gratefulness. And it feels like the only time people say they're thankful for something is this time of year. And
I'm paranoid as fuck when people say what they're thankful for because one, whenever I really hear people talk about, like whenever I'm with someone, when the fuck do we ever talk? I was like, oh, I'm thankful for like blah blah.
We say, well, I'm glad this happened. Oh, I'm super happy that this is happening.
Yeah, the only time we really do that is when we are under the influence of water, very hydrated. We get a little emotional.
Well,
but
hey,
yeah,
speak for yourself, Jared.
I am. Well, we talked about it. He said, "Oh, we're kind of similar."
I think the difference really is vulnerability, and depending on the people you're around, depending on the situation you're in, you're more or less willing to be vulnerable. But I also feel like humility is a branch of gratitude. And if you're just in general a humble person, that gives off the essence of being thankful for something, right? Like the difference between humility and arrogance is like, I accept that I'm not, I guess, not everything is perfect and I don't need everything to be perfect, but I'm happy with the way things are. That's something that comes off as humble in my eyes, where arrogance is like, well, I expect better, I need better, and I think I deserve better. Like, and yet there are situations where people need to put themselves above whatever. We've already talked about that. But at the end of the day, I'm in a very like fortunate situation that I'm in, and I shouldn't be complaining that this other person got this thing I didn't get? Because why am I focusing on that person? Why do I care what they got? It doesn't, other than the fact that I wanted the thing they have now. Like, that mindset seems so damaging in the long run, especially and you can see it in certain people who get past a certain age, and like when you get past a certain age, you stop really evolving your personality. And so there's these people that get set in stone and they just don't change, and they believe that, oh, well, I'm older than you, I know more than you, which means whatever I say trumps whatever you say. And then that eventually snowballs into like, well, how dare you know more than me? Or how dare you achieve this thing? I wasn't able to achieve that thing at your age. But it's all context based. It's like, I guess it's like, it's what I was saying about the negativity. There's just so much negative everything. And not set, okay. Before I go on another tangent like this, I don't think the whole world is always negative all the time. Like and this maybe is an example of, I'm thankful that there is both positive and negative, because if everything was negative, I'd be miserable. But like, there is positive. There's a lot of positive in our society. Like I was saying, there's a lot of negative, but I also feel like our society is mostly driven by like money and social media at this point, and news, or however you want to interpret that. But I just clump it all, social media in general, online information. And I feel like 70% of that is like 70% of the person to person interactions, I feel from what I observe, are just like people just fighting with each other. Like no one can be like, oh, I see your point. It's either, do you agree with me? No. Okay, well, let's just agree to disagree. Instead of like coming to an understanding or trying to get to know the other person. And the problem is people have such short attention spans online, and people don't feel the need to put that much energy into something like this, where we said this last time, we have unlimited communication at our fingertips, and we limit ourselves because it's like too much work. Imagine if everybody just like tried to communicate with each other online. It's difficult, but what if we made an effort to like have as good of communication as necessary with the people we interact with online? I feel like we'd probably be using it in different ways. But right now we're using comment features on all social media to like yell at each other and scream our opinions. We're kind of screaming our opinions, but like we're doing it where you can choose to opt in or not. We're not going on some other random post that people are scrolling by and being like, look at my opinion, sticking a flag in the ground.
Well, to get back to the thankful part.
Yeah.
What I was originally talking about, one thing, this is going back to what you said earlier about, you know, how often it was ironic. Like, I don't know. You're saying, you know, people don't really talk about what they're thankful for. People really only talk about what they're thankful for, like during Thanksgiving time. That's the theme of it. But when it's not Thanksgiving time, and even when it is, I'm skeptical from social media when I see what do you call them? Not icons, not influencers. When I see influencers talking about, it's like, oh, I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for that, blah blah blah, and then you read the comments of whatever, and it's just like, oh, this person's such a wonderful person, this or that. And it's like, feels like it's a bit deceiving. It's like it's like when someone's filming themselves doing all this charity work that they're doing for someone, and then posting it. I'm just like, you went out of your way to obviously highlight a snippet in your day.
Yes,
that might have been the first time you've ever done charity, and that might have been the last time you've done charity until you upload another video of you physically showing. Because we're getting off tangent to social media here, it's just obviously deceiving because people that aren't in your personal life aren't with you a lot.
There's definitely a disconnect.
All you see of that person, and there's only so many people you could see every day.
Yeah.
But for all the millions and millions of followers on that social media platform, all they see is that snippet of you, and then they create whatever fantasy imagination they have of you. And that's one issue that I have with the concept called the halo effect. When you see someone that you really like, it's like, oh, a content creator for this. You put a little halo on their head, and then you just kind of think, oh,
they can do no wrong.
But it's more of like, it's like they must know about this, they must know about this, they must know about that. Like, you just put a halo on them, kind of like you can't do any wrong, and you just assume that whatever they're talking about, they really know what they're talking about. They could be talking about something they heard 2 minutes about, and then they're talking their ass up about it. It's just social media.
I think
it's a lot.
I'd say it's very difficult. The disconnect happens because, one, these people don't actually know who you are as a person. So if we start getting people outside of our personal lives listening to our podcast, they don't know us as people. They know us as podcast people. They know us based on the conversations we have exclusively on recording. So I'd say, as far as influencers go, the disconnect happens when they have this mass of people who don't really know who they are. They just know their influencer side. And then this person's genuinely trying to be thankful for something, but that is something incredibly difficult to convey through a text post or through video even. Like, it's really difficult to convey, like, thank you guys so much, I really appreciate it, because especially in such a saturated place, saturated market, where pretty much every influencer says that, like every other video, right? I'm so thankful for all your support, thank you. And like, they probably mean it. They probably genuinely mean it. Like, we appreciate when people listen to our stuff, but when we say thank you for listening, we appreciate you tuning in and digesting what we're saying, that still comes off as like disconnected because they don't know us. I mean, the other influencers don't know their actual audience on a personal level, so it's so much harder to have such a personal feeling conveyed, I'd say. And social media makes that all the worse with all these other things. And like you were saying with the charity thing, even if it was their only charity, if they're being genuine about it, it wouldn't be a big deal. But it's so hard to be genuine about something when you're recording it and making it into content.
Yes, and like this is all. It's like these assumptions of mine are based off. It's like, I don't know you, so I'm just stuck with to think about whatever I think about.
It depends on the biases you have in your own head towards. You have a completely different bias against or towards influencers than someone else would, where someone else defaultly expects the best from an influencer. So when they say, oh, I've done this charity, look, it's like, oh, what a good person. Then you see that and you're like, I don't trust it.
Well, it's certainly a skepticism of mine, because there's going to be cases where you have people that genuinely believe in the charity and that are just simply making content without, like, just as simple as that. But then you will have the people, hey, that guy did really well with that charity thing, I'm going to do one too, with the priority of being the views and growth.
Oh, yeah.
And so I wanted to then go back on what you were talking about, how, the genuineness of people, how compared to when we say thank you, compared to when someone bigger says thank you, to when someone says, like, I think it's fair to say there'd be a difference. But I also think that's inevitable, because there's a thing called the diamond water paradox. And that basically is, like, right now we have a guy who's stranded in a desert, and presented to him is water or diamonds. He's going to pick water.
Yep.
We're going to take a guy and just plop him in a first world country, and he's presented in front of him water or diamonds.
Yep.
He's going to take diamonds.
Yep.
And I think this has to do, it's kind of different concepts now, but I can relate it. It's, humans are also good at normalizing things.
Yep.
And so when you have a guy, for whatever social media platform he has, when he first got to like 1,000 followers or whatever, that surge is like, holy shit, so many.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets to 10,000, like, holy shit. And then like gets to the first 1 million. It's like, holy shit.
But then he gets another 1,000.
Yes. And it's just like, well.
You know, direct example.
What?
We were excited when we got 50.
Yeah.
We haven't said anything. All we've talked about is how we got to 150. Right? And
well, I think for now, you know, maybe we look at it as the increment of 50. It's like, oh, hell yeah.
Right.
But now when we get to 350, it's like, let's just wait for
500.
For 500. And that's like after
1,000.
that, after that's 1,000, then maybe 2,000, then maybe 5,000.
Yeah.
And so I just think that it is inevitable to reach that point because you just simply get used to it. And it's just, that is what it is.
It becomes the normal. Yeah. It's interesting. And I think that plays directly into taking things for granted because one thing becomes normal. So then you want the next thing. I feel like it all comes down to human nature. I think at the end of the day, the end of this discussion, I just want to leave off on like, I feel like as a society, we fail to teach gratitude. And not on some detrimental level. Like, it's not like we're having such huge societal problems or anything. It's mostly as like, I feel like we should be more grateful than we are. And that's mostly from the perspective of people on the internet, which is a very small percentage. Like I said, it's a vocal minority. So it's only the very few people that are yelling about it on the internet. But like at the same time, even then, it's just a matter of be happy for what you have, work for what you want next, and understand that like not everything works out. And if you live with that mindset, there's very little that could really fully disappoint you to the extent that people really act like they are. So anyways, be thankful. Be happy that you're still alive and kicking. You don't have to be walking, like Jared said earlier. You just got to be there, you know? You just got to be a human. It's very vague, but
I feel like the word is at least.
At least be a human.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, it's like, at least you have this. At least you have that.
And that's a very commonly used like argument against people who act that way. Like, well, at least you have this. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed listening. This one was strangely more political than normal, but that's okay. Wasn't too bad. So if you are listening on YouTube, go ahead, leave a comment if you'd like about the question we were talking about earlier.
First, click on the video.
Yeah. First step would be
let's get the view
watching
first.
this video. And then if you're listening on iTunes / Apple Podcasts, just leaving a rating would be super helpful. And we're on all social media, so if we're just search the name, we should show up. Just follow us there. We post updates every week when the new episode drops, which is every Friday at noon. And I usually put a little snippet. That way it's like, you know what you're getting into, I guess. But other than that, do you have any final thoughts, Jared?
Nope.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for listening, and bye-bye.